Hi, my name is Roberto. Let's get into this self-primacy mindset and let's discuss a specific technique that you can use to exert control over your own behavior. Specifically in this video, I want to tell you about a technique that you can use to improve your self-talk. And as you might already know, self-talk is nothing more than our internal speech, the internal dialogue that we have with ourselves. If you don't have yet an idea about what self-talk is, you can check my previous video about the explanation of self-talk from the behavioral science perspective. And remember, that is just one part of the truth, that is one part of the full picture, and we're gonna talk in this case about one more realistic example of what self-talk can be and how it can be used. Let's get right to business. Okay, so a lot of people think, and even in behavioral science, a lot of scientists think that negative thinking has no use at all, that it's just completely harmful and that it should be avoided. But even if that was truth, it is really, like I said, it cannot be the full picture, because there are many examples that show that when mastered, negative self-talk can actually be used to motivate you, to motivate behavior, even in the long term. So the key here is that, as I am about to show you, you should know when to use negative self-talk, when to accept negative thinking, and also, part of it, you should know when to let it go. And that is very important. Well, let's put an example. And this is, like I said, not an example from science. It is an example from real life. And it is a very famous example. And it is honestly one of my favorite examples, at least the ones I know. And this is how it goes. Years ago, I was watching Mike Tyson's documentary from 2008, which is titled Tyson. As a general note, if you have not seen this documentary, you should see it, because honestly, Mike Tyson was in his time, one of the clear examples of peak performance in sports, because his body, his mind were finely tuned, and especially were interested in the mind part. So in his discipline, he was a master, he was a beast. And of course, we know maybe his life was not always in line with that. But in terms of the sport, he was a good example of what kind of mentality you could have. But okay, so just check out the documentary and you can also tell me what you think about it. But in one very interesting part of this documentary, Mike narrates what he's thinking. And he specifically narrates about his fear of failure. And he narrates what he's thinking, especially before fighting someone. So when he's training, when he's preparing for a fight, he's talking about how he's feeling about that. And he mentions that he was, at those moments, preparing for the fight months before, he was thinking about his opponent. And strikingly, he says, okay, during my training, I'm thinking about this guy. I am thinking that he's going to beat me. I am thinking that he's going to humiliate me, and that he's capable of beating me. And Mike Tyson was using that to motivate himself to train harder, to try every day to improve. So just simply because he was afraid of this person, he was afraid of his opponent, who was still months away from facing. So Tyson even says that, I had dreamed of this person beating me, It's up to that level that he was thinking. And he says, I have stayed afraid of this man during every training. And the idea here then is that, okay, the key point to observe is that Mike Tyson was using, in fact, negative self-talk as a motivation. He was doing this during his training to stay motivated and, like I said, train harder. So just let's think, how many of us have felt that way? How many of us feel afraid of failing, afraid of failure, afraid of being humiliated in our social circle, in our work, even with strangers we feel that. So when this happens, we often just sink deeper, We don't realize that this negative thinking might have a power in motivating us. And what Mike Tyson did is that he practiced and he mastered negative self-talk because he used it at the right moment, and he used it when it served him the most. And now that is not all, because very interestingly, Mike also narrates and he explains how the day of the fight, after preparing and after being afraid of his opponent for months and training hard, the day of the fight, he starts switching from negative to positive. And he goes like this. He basically says, okay, the day of the fight, I start to think, okay, I have confidence in myself. And when he's preparing for the fight, a few minutes away from it, he's putting his gloves and he's thinking, okay, I'm still a bit afraid, but I am growing in confidence. And then he enters the arena and he's approaching the ring. And this is a very exciting part of the documentary, because then he starts literally showing how he's transforming negative to positive self-talk. And honestly, I want to say that I think Mike Tyson deserves the equivalent of an Oscar or a Nobel Prize for basically the best self-talk performance that I have ever seen, because he is narrating that when I come out into the arena, I have supreme confidence, but I am still full of fear. That's what he says. But as he is approaching, he starts repeating to himself, the closer I get to the ring, the more confident I get. And you can hear him repeat it several times. The closer I get, the more confidence I get. The closer, the more confident. The closer, the more confident. And then the climax arrives, when from going to his trainings and being afraid of this person and trying to activate his survival instinct, now he is just meters away from the ring. And he enters the ring. And it ends up in a perfect phrase, because Mike Tyson says that as he enters the ring, he's a god. No one can beat him. Those are literally his words. Once I enter the ring, I am a god, and no one can beat me. So he went from negative to positive. And he used negative when it was useful, and now that he needs to have confidence in himself in the ring, on top of the ring, he is considering himself unbeatable. So when I saw this the first time, I was working as a sports psychologist, and of course, knowing what I knew even back then, I knew this was a prime example of self-talk. But now, in terms of using self-talk and negative self-talk, that scene really, Mike Tyson also elaborates a bit more. He gives kind of like a masterclass of self-talk, because later he's also talking about what he's doing on top of the ring before the fight begins. He's saying, I'm staring my opponent, and when he looks down, I know I have beat him. So he uses this kind of techniques to grow in confidence, and to know that he has like a mental edge over his opponent. But anyway, that's once he's on the ring, that's a different part. Let's focus right now on that transformation from negative to positive. And like I said, we all have that. We all have experienced fear of failure. And social beings as we are, most of us, of course, don't want to be in that situation. And it is such a natural state of humanity. And the key here is that we must not try to avoid it. What we need to do is to learn to work with it. So the idea is that Mike Tyson here is giving us a clear example of how he learned to work with that, to work with his negative thinking. And so the big question is, how can you use this technique? And to put it simply, just what you should do is think of a situation that is challenging for you, where you often struggle with negative thinking. It can be at work, it can be in personal life, it can be anything. And what you need to do is to make a timeline of it. There is a performance moment, and there is like kind of a preparatory moment. So you need to realize, when is negative self-talk going to be useful for me? When can I use it to boost my motivation or to energize myself? And when, especially, should I stop it? When should I let it go and start embracing positive self-talk? So this is one classic example. Just think, the first thing, like I said, is negative thinking, negative self-talk is normal, but you have to master when you embrace it and when you let it go. So to do that, of course, it means that during the moments before performance, you're focusing on your preparation plan. For Mike Tyson, of course, it was trainings every day, and he was using negative self-talk to boost that. But for you, it could be something else, but you can use negative self-talk to get you going every day, and if you feel that energy, then it was gonna drive you to keep trying, to keep improving, because negative thinking is a powerful motivator, like I have said. So sometimes, of course, in our daily life, it's not about a specific opponent. It's not that you're gonna fight someone, but the idea is that there might be a difficult circumstance or a challenging situation for you, and that is enough. That is your opponent. That's what you want to avoid in the end, or to do better at. So the key of this technique is think of a timeline, or write down a timeline of this challenging situation, and locate when you can use negative self-talk to motivate you and when you should be able to let it go. And you can do what Mike Tyson did. You can basically put tiny stages at the end and say, okay, if you're making a presentation, it can be the night before. The night before, you start to switch to positive, and then you enter the meeting room, you are even more positive than before. You can make specific statements for that. So in the end, as the moment of performance is coming close, it's approaching, it's almost there, then it is more useful to think positively than negatively. And if we go back to Mike's case, this is important because, during Mike Tyson's fights, he took a lot of punches, it happened, and that's also normal for us. There will be setbacks, there will be punches, not like physical punches, but, life punches, and there will be mistakes. And what really matters is that when you're performing, you need to believe in yourself. So negative is gone, positive should stay and remain. So your goal is to practice and master this transition from negative to positive. And when practicing, if you find any difficulty because the situation you chose is very challenging, just switch it. Just use an easier one. Because like I have said before, if you practice with the easy situations, you're just building tiny moments of practice so that in the real ones, you are already trained, you have already experienced what it means to do this transition in this case. So remember, self-primacy is not a self-help magical pill. It is about learning, it is about mastering, and it is about mastering through practice. So that is how you can control your own behavior. So to summarize, learn about Mike Tyson's technique about negative self-talk. To do that, you can draw up your own timeline or just think about it in your mind for a specific situation. And then just try to imagine, okay, when should I embrace negative thinking to motivate me? And when should I let it go once performance has begun? So the use of this timeline, of course, it's a way for you to accept negative thinking when it can be useful for you. And you should practice to gradually transform that. But anyway, I really hope this technique can be useful for you. You should observe, like I said, that this is not something that comes from science. This is an example that we can see from a top athlete like Mike. And, that doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just a perspective, but it shows us that human experiences from our peers, from people like us, people that are similar to us or having through similar things like us, can be very useful, and we can learn from that. So, I wonder if you have any similar experiences with negative thinking. Please tell me about them. Write them in the comment. I would love to read them. And as usual, I will have videos coming about this. I will have some blogs about this to talk about this topic. If you have any questions, if you have any interest in this, just choose your own media and just follow me on my platforms. And remember, that's what self-primacy is about. We want to learn, we want to practice, we want to master, and especially we want to share techniques to control our own behavior. That is the mindset that we're seeking. So as always, I appreciate your support. Give me the like, subscribe, follow me on social media, and thank you for watching this video.